Available in paperback at e-readers, Isis, Dark Incubus. The goddess next door gets enthralled in a romantic entanglement with an evil incubus in this all-new Isis series adventure. Get your copy of Isis, Dark Incubus in paperback and e-readers today. One of my viewers wanted me to do another installment in the Hollywood Historical Couples in Crisis series. And for this installment in the Hollywood Historical Couples in Crisis series, I'm going to be talking about legendary 20th century singer Elvis Presley and his wife Priscilla Presley. Historical Couples in Crisis. Now, the first person in this Hollywood historical couple in crisis I'm going to be talking about is Elvis Presley. Now, Elvis Presley is known in America for being the so-called king of rock and roll, and is also known as one of the greatest musicians of the 20th century, and is considered an icon of American music. However, Elvis Presley became a man in crisis due to the dysfunctional home he grew up in, and he wound up on the road to becoming a man in crisis, I believe, since the day he was born. Now, Elvis Presley was born in 1935 in Tupelo, Mississippi, to Vernon Presley and Gladys Love, and as he was born inside of that home, he was the first of two twin brothers, and his other brother, Jesse Garin, wound up being stillborn. And as Elvis Presley was raised, he basically wound up on the road to becoming a man in crisis due to the dysfunctional relationship he had with his mother. Now, Elvis Presley was a boy who grew up with a mother and a father inside of a Christian home. However, Vernon could not really maintain his employment, and the family grew up in poverty, relying on neighbors and government assistance, and this fragile structure that Elvis was raised in basically fell apart when he was about 3 years old, when Vernon, a so-called Christian man, decided to participate in the sin of lying by altering a check, and after he wound up altering this check, this basically led to him going to jail, and as this led to him going to jail, this put Elvis on the road to becoming a man in crisis, because the only male figure in his life had been taken out of his life, and with the male figure taken out of his life, he began to form a too close relationship with his mother, and when he started forming that too close relationship with his mother, this turned into codependency, where he saw his mother as the ultimate leader and authority figure at an early age, and the only one who could meet his needs. And as he saw his mother as the only one who could meet his needs, what happened to Elvis was he wound up becoming extremely codependent on his mother, because they both slept in the same bed, because Elvis grew up poor, and as he grew up poor, what happened with Elvis is he wound up just believing that his mother was the God in his life, and they had gotten so close to the point where Elvis was basically still sleeping in the same bed with his mother up until his early teen years. And as they grew together, what happened with Elvis is that he even formed a language with his mother, but that was just showing how deeply codependent he was on his mother for his needs. And his mother really never encouraged Elvis to go out here and take his own natural masculine power and natural agency, and this led to the boy growing up becoming shy and awkward. And even though his mother tried to encourage him to go out here and take things like singing, he did do singing at 10 years old. He placed 5th in a contest, and when he was 10 years old, and his mother bought him a guitar, but the whole thing is people really were not encouraging this boy to learn the things that he needed. Yes, he learned about music at an early age, but he wasn't learning those male life skills or male survival skills that a boy needs to survive. And one of the things that a boy has to learn is to cut the apron strings early on, so that he can go out here and take agency for himself and take power over his own life. And that's something Elvis didn't understand, and this led to kids looking to bully and harass him because they saw weakness in Elvis, and they saw weakness in Elvis because they saw a boy who, while he had great musical talent starting out, some people mocked him and said he was playing hillbilly music, but the whole thing was he didn't have those male life skills to be able to set standards for himself, set boundaries for himself, and he was trying to persevere, even in the face of teachers telling him that he got a C in music in the 8th grade and had no aptitude for singing. He still kept looking to persevere, but the whole thing is he never had a man in his life to give him guidance to be able to become his own man and start setting a direction for himself. And instead of him looking to lead, what happened was Elvis was a follower who basically just could not read music, played by ear, and basically was a guy whose, again, talent was not really developed properly. Again, primarily, I believe, because of the female-headed household he was in. And even worse, what happened with Elvis, as he was not popular in school, he was very awkward with girls, and his awkwardness with girls was the reason, again, that he had problems with girls due to the dysfunctional way he was raised. Because when it comes to boys, when they have a father in their life, they can go out here and have relationships with girls and want to have relationships with girls. But the whole thing is Elvis wound up growing up awkward, and the thing that kept him from having ability to connect with girls was his mother. Now, Elvis's too close relationship with his mother, he was again codependent on his mom, and because he believed his mom was the most powerful person in the world, this made it hard for him to have relationships with women because he looked up to women like gods and did not see them as the people they were out here. He didn't see who a girl really was, and all he saw was his mother projected onto most of the women in his life. And because he saw his mother projected on those women, that made it where he had a hard time seeing women as sexual and seeing women as attractive and desirable, and made it where he had a hard time having relationships with girls. Now, he did have steady girlfriends, but he never really looked to escalate those relationships into anything really sexual. And the main reason why he did that was because, again, he had this bond with his mother that was just disturbing. And because he had that bond with his mother, he could not bond with a woman sexually, he could not connect with a woman sexually, could not see a woman as sexual because he saw women like his mother, and that's what really made it where, yes, Elvis was a heartthrob and a hunk, but he was a heartthrob and a hunk who was basically neutered by his own relationship with his mother. Now, as Elvis went on making his music, he became a teen heartthrob, and eventually as he became a teen heartthrob and a star, he broke out as this bad boy who was created for rock and roll music, and this was deliberately done because what they wanted to do was hijack black music and put a white face on it, but that white face was an impotent one, because even though Elvis Presley did a lot of gyrating on stage, he was conflicted because of his Christian beliefs and his old issues as related to sexuality due to the disturbing codependent relationship with his mother. And this codependent relationship he had with his mother made it where while girls were out here looking to chase him, he could not go out here and see himself as a leader of those women, and could not see himself as a leader of those crazed crowds of girls who had been told that this guy was a hunk, but this guy basically was a chump, and a chump who had basically been neutered and emasculated by his mother, and was out here still trying to be the Hollywood heartthrob who was making movies like Jailhouse Rock and making appearances on TV shows. And then eventually all of that success led to a peak where Elvis Presley went from being in music and movies to being drafted in the U.S. military. Now, the military usually is a place where a boy winds up being shaped into a man because he is in the presence of other men and taught leadership and male life skills from other men and taught to respect male authority figures like drill sergeants, Unfortunately, what happened to Elvis Presley is after he was drafted into the U.S. military and taken into military service, he went from being a man to winding up becoming a man in crisis, because what happened to Elvis Presley is that his mother wound up passing away in, I believe, 1960 or so. And as his mother wound up passing away, this is where Elvis Presley basically wound up with his entire life falling completely apart, because the woman who he saw as a god basically wound up leaving this world. And when his mother wound up leaving this world, this is where people said Elvis Presley completely changed as a person. And Elvis wound up completely changing as a person after his mother wound up passing away. And this is where Elvis became a completely different person. And yes, he was able to go on and continue on with his career. And that's where he wound up starting on a road to a decline. I believe his decline really started with the passing of his mother. And because his mother wound up passing away, he wound up in a situation where as he met 14-year-old Priscilla Presley, who was another woman in crisis I'm going to cover in another part of this video. What happened was Elvis basically was in a position where he had to take leadership over himself. And as he had to take leadership over himself, this is where Elvis wound up losing his direction, because without his mother there, as related to him in his life, he wound up becoming lost because he didn't know how to lead himself. And he didn't know how to lead himself because he didn't have a father to show him a model of manhood. He didn't have anybody there to give him any sort of guidance. And he was out here hoping to, again, get involved with this 14-year-old girl. This is something that a man would always say, oh, I'm not going to deal with no 14-year-old girl. But the whole thing is his power dynamics were completely thrown off, because when he got involved with this 14-year-old girl, he didn't understand how to be a man. So he got involved with her because he still had the mind of a child. But the whole thing is that Elvis, as he started to, after his mother passed away, he walked away from music and he started to go into acting, and he focused on films from about 1960 to 1968. And as he was doing the films, he wound up becoming more and more lost as related to the direction of his career. And he wound up becoming lost because when it comes to a man, he's supposed to have a course for where he wants to go in his career, goals he wants to set. But instead of Elvis looking to lead himself, he was out here looking to just work on these films. I believe one of the reasons why he wanted to work on these films was to escape the pain he had as related to the passing of his mother, because when it comes to a lot of men who are very close to their mothers, what they do is throw themselves into their work to escape the pain that they have as related to the grief that they have over their mothers. And that's what I believe happened with Elvis, that led to him going on a major state of decline as related to his personal life. And as he looked to go out here and try to deal with that, he was working, and then decided after 7 years of being in a relationship with Priscilla Presley, he decided to marry Priscilla Presley, not really because of love, but because of obligation to the church and obligation to himself. Again, he had said, okay, I've been with this woman for 7 years as related to obligation, and it was time to marry this woman, not because he loved her, but because he wanted to had an obligation to her. And he also wanted to get publicity because the Clambake soundtrack that he did for the movie Clambake had a record low sales, and he was hoping to get people to see him as a serious performer as related to music and movies. So him getting married was about trying to get people attention back on him, not really out of love, because beta males, for the most part, do things out of obligation, not really out of love. And what he did was coordinate things for the 1968 comeback special, a 1968 comeback special that he wanted to do to try to revive interest in his career and get it back to the way it was in the 1950s, because at that time, when it came to rock music, the Beatles had basically, and many other musicians like the Rolling Stones had taken over, and Elvis's sound had become a joke to many people who were music lovers, and Elvis looked to try to rebuild his career in the 1960s. But as he was trying to rebuild his career in the 1960s as a conservative musician, he met with Richard Nixon because his music was supposed to be different from the other music out here, and he was out here looking to try to rebuild his career as a clean-cut all-American musician who cared about America. And unfortunately, as he was looking to rebuild his career, he had his marriage break down, and his marriage broke down because of a series of affairs that he had with women. He had one affair with a woman, Joyce Bova, which led to her having a pregnancy and an abortion, and he was allegedly having affairs with a lot of his female performers, and his marriage with his wife wound up falling apart because when it comes to women who marry beta males, they cannot really share with you because they build an emotional wall that keeps you from getting close to them. And as women who are mainly emotional want to get their emotional needs met by a man, they find they can't get their emotional needs met by a beta male because the beta male's emotions are invested in another woman. And when it came to Elvis Presley, his emotions were invested in his mom, and he basically missed his mom, who he had the bond with, and that made it where he could not bond with another woman because he had already bonded with his mother in his disturbing codependent relationship that he could not share in an interdependent relationship with Priscilla or get close to her. And while he did have all of these other type of relationships, again, according to reports, some say that it wasn't sexual because he could not really see those women as sexual outside of this woman named Joyce Bova and maybe a couple of other women, because when it came to him, Elvis, again, he had become really detached as related to women and could not connect with women. And while he had these relationships with them, he basically wound up getting involved with these women, and then eventually Priscilla got into an affair with a karate instructor, Mike Stone, because Elvis was into karate. And what happened with Elvis is that when he found out his wife had this affair, he did what many beta males do, wanting to go out and hurt people because they were doing what he was doing, again showing the whole double standard that many beta males have as related to relationships. When it comes to beta males, they have these extreme double standards as related to relationships. They can cheat and be justified in cheating, but the woman, if she cheats, he wants to go out here and hurt people. And he was so in a rage over this that it eventually led to Elvis winding up divorcing his wife. And after he divorced his wife, he got a new girlfriend, Linda Thompson, a Memphis beauty queen, and he basically got involved with her because he was overcompensating due to his insecurities about that relationship. And the entire divorce, compounded with the death of Elvis's mother, basically made it where Elvis was hit with a blow that he never really recovered from, because after the death of his mother, Elvis changed and wasn't the same person. And then the divorce basically made it where he was just hit again because his relationships with women were with him seeing them as female authority figures, and things not working out for a beta male who's a female with female authority figures. This crushes the beta male, and as this crushed, Elvis, what it did was lead to Elvis winding up starting to further overcompensate by scheduling show after show in Vegas and all over the country. And he was taking drugs because his health was is related to things, because he was working himself to death. And in 1973, that's when his marriage wound up ending, and that's when his health went into a serious decline, where Elvis gained weight, where he had issues as related to overdosing on barbiturates, and spent 3 days in a coma in a hotel suite after the first incident. And then in 1973, he was hospitalized for the effects of a pethidine addiction. Again, he was taking drugs all the time, and his handlers were getting him drugs because what he wanted to do was escape through his work. He wanted to escape through work because he wanted to get away from the emotions he had regarding the passing of his mother. He wanted to escape through work in order to get away from the pain of being rejected by his wife, Priscilla. I mean, he was basically just trying to continue working every day in order to get away from things. And in 1973, he did 168 concerts. Did 168 concerts mainly because he wanted to get away from the trauma of losing his mother, the trauma of his wife divorcing him, the trauma of being rejected by women. This is what Elvis did as related to music and looked to escape through addictions like drugs. And I talk about this in my book, The Man Crisis, in the chapter Addiction and the Man Crisis. I mean, what happens to beta males is that they just try to go on and persevere, never wanting to confront the issues that are bothering them and looking to work through them to go out here and just continue to work. And that's what happened with Elvis in 1973. He produced 18 songs, enough for 2 albums, and made no studio recordings for 1974 because he was basically burnt out. Again, he was getting a lot of success as related to these Grammy wins and all these things at the time, but his personal life was a mess because he had not gone out here and began coping with things as related to his personal life. And that's what led to his relationship with Linda Thompson ending, because she was just somebody there to show that he could continue to go on, but he wasn't dealing with the hurt. And that when that relationship ended, he began dating Ginger Alden in 1976, then proposed to her again because he wanted to prove to everyone that he could make a relationship work. Unfortunately, when it came to Elvis, he had just basically changed, and he had become an overweight, obese man who was just taking drugs every day to get through life, and he had become just a complete wreck as related to his life. And in 1977, he just could not go on, and due to his body basically not taking on things because of the trauma on his mind, and he tried to find escape through spiritualism and would just go out here and try to find ways to escape, again, never really dealing with these issues. And this led to him becoming more and more paranoid, and became more and more paranoid to the point where he was just falling apart. And his last song, Way Down, was his last single, released in 1977. And he was on his way, trying to continue to go on, but he could not go on anymore. I mean, this man was basically he had become a complete mess. And then on 1977, what happened to Elvis on August 16th is he wound up dying as a result of things. He was found unresponsive on the bathroom floor of his mansion. That's where his fiancée found him. And that's where this man, who basically worked his entire life to get this success, wound up dying as related to not dealing with the stress brought on from all of the drugs that he has taken, all of the stress that he was dealing with as related to the passing of his mother, the divorce of his wife. All of this led to Elvis going from being one of the greatest musicians as related to rock and roll music to winding up on the road to becoming another man in crisis. Now, the next person I'm going to be talking about in this legendary Hollywood historical couple in crisis is Elvis Presley's ex-wife, Priscilla Presley. Now, Priscilla Presley was born Priscilla Wagner back in 1945, and as she was born in 1945, she wound up becoming a woman in crisis because her mother had a secret as related to her natural biological father. Now, Priscilla Presley's biological mother, Anna Lillian Iverson, had a secret as related to who Priscilla's father was, because her biological father was a U.S. Navy pilot named James Wagner, who at 23 years old, after dating for more than 3 years, married Priscilla's mom, Anna Lillian Iverson, and they were looking to be a couple with their first child until James Wagner wound up passing away in a plane crash while returning on home from leave when his daughter was 6 months old. And 3 years later, Anna Lillian Iverson was looking to try to rebuild her life with another U.S. Air Force officer, Paul Bayou from Quebec, Canada. And she wound up marrying that man within 12 months. And I believe she wound up marrying that man within 12 months because, as a single, widowed mother, she knew that she didn't have many options as related to relationships and decided to go and build a family with this man who adopted her daughter from the previous marriage and then went on to build his own family with it making his own children. Now, they kept this secret until Priscilla was 13 years old and found out the truth about who her real father was. And when she found out who her real father was, I believe this is the thing that put Priscilla on the road to becoming a woman in crisis because of this secret. And because of this secret, I believe that she basically believed she couldn't trust her mother, which compounded the problems because Priscilla was a shy girl and having to move every couple of years as related to Paul Bayou's military career. This really was a thing that basically, I believe, stressed out Priscilla, and it stressed out Priscilla because she had to move from place to place in Germany, and eventually, as they stayed at the Helene Hotel, it became too expensive for them to stay there, and then eventually they wound up finding a home that was a former brothel and had to stay in that home, and that's where Priscilla wound up meeting 24-year-old Elvis Presley in Bad Nauheim, Germany. And at that time, he was at the home where he had rented a space in that home during his military presence, and Elvis was basically showing how much of a dysfunctional male he was in that situation, because in the presence of Paul Bayou, he had an issue because this man was a male authority figure. This man was a leader and head of his family, and as a leader and head of his family, this made Elvis basically feel awkward and embarrassed to be in the presence of an actual masculine man. And as he was in the presence of an actual masculine man, he was just not feeling comfortable, but he did feel comfortable enough in front of 14-year-old Priscilla. And I believe one of the reasons why Elvis felt comfortable around Priscilla was because he felt like this was a younger girl and he could have power in that relationship, and the dynamics were different. And with Priscilla being 14 years old, she was in the presence of what was considered to be a high status man, and that basically is what I believe kicked in her hypergamy as related to getting involved with Elvis Presley. That hypergamy wound up kicking in and gave her an opportunity to escape a dysfunctional home situation where she felt like she couldn't trust her mother or her father because he wasn't really her father, and looking for an escape from a relationship through Elvis, which they kept through pen pals and things like that. But the whole thing is, Elvis was out here. He was supposedly having a relationship with Nancy Sinatra at the same time, but Elvis managed to maintain this relationship as related to Priscilla, and was maintaining this relationship with Priscilla even though he knew she was underage, because one, he wanted to have power over Priscilla, and two, he felt like he could be distant. Again, distance from this woman made him feel comfortable, because the whole thing is Elvis had problems dealing with women overall due to the codependent relationship with his mother. And as he had this codependent relationship with his mother, this is the thing that led to his relationship, really, as he was trying to build it with Priscilla. They allowed her to come to his house even though she was underage. At Graceland, she still came to his house back and forth and came and got involved with him. Now, Elvis says he didn't get involved with her sexually until they were married, but he was out here with other performers like Anne Margaret and Nancy Sinatra, and as he was having these relationships with these movie stars, he still was, again, still seeing Priscilla, but the relationship wasn't really a functional one because Elvis's heart belonged to one woman, and that was his mother. And because he loved his mother more than his wife, this is what led to him, even though he was getting closer to Priscilla, not able to really connect with Priscilla and bond with Priscilla in a relationship. And because he wasn't able to bond with her, even though he wound up getting married to Priscilla back in, I believe, about 1967, they were never really able to come together and bond spiritually and emotionally, because Elvis's heart still belonged to his mother, who had passed away. And even though Elvis's mom had passed away, because of the codependent relationship he wound up putting Priscilla further on the road to becoming a woman in crisis, in spite of the big wedding and even having a daughter, because even though they had sex and had a child, Elvis never really bonded with Priscilla spiritually, because his spirit was still with his mom, and his spirit never really got close to Priscilla's, and that distance basically wound up being one of the things that drove a wedge between Elvis and Priscilla, and wound up destroying the closeness that they had, because as she wound up getting pregnant, he couldn't get close to her, and as he wound up getting close to other women as related to these affairs, he never really could get close to her to form that emotional connection, and this led to Priscilla going out and participating in an affair of her own with a karate instructor. And as she wound up participating in this affair with this karate instructor, this is where Priscilla wound up on a road to her becoming a woman in crisis, and again, winding up becoming a woman in crisis who I believe was looking to participate in emotional hypergamy by monkey branching from Elvis, and monkey branching from Elvis because he wasn't looking to meet her emotional needs. Now, she participated in hypergamy by getting involved with Elvis by looking to latch on to a high-status man who she believed would take her away from the toxic home she was in, as related to not being able to trust her mother and her father, to looking to wind up in another toxic home with a man who could not be emotionally available to her and emotionally connect or emotionally bond with her. And with that, she wound up in a toxic home with Elvis Presley that did not really come together to build a family. And then she wound up monkey branching over to Mike Stone. And as she monkey branched to Mike Stone in this affair, this is what triggered the anger at Elvis as related to Elvis. He was so angry and enraged that he looked to participate in even in exploding in rage for an extended period of time. Now, both of them, again, had problems with the marriage because Elvis had a problem with sexual interest in Priscilla, and he had a problem with sexual interest in women in general. He had a problem, again, because he had these mommy issues as related to not seeing women as sexual because of his mother, and because his mother, he had problems with seeing women as sexual because of his mother. He could not bond with Elvis on that level. She could not bond with him because he could not connect with her because there was an emotional wall between them. And this is the reason why she wound up walking away from Elvis and looking to divorce Elvis. But this basically wound up leading to Elvis basically, again, exploding in rage and wound up having the marriage basically deteriorated to the point where it led to Elvis's life falling completely apart. But after Priscilla basically wound up getting involved with Elvis and divorcing Elvis, she then lived with Mike Stone for a while, but the relationship dissolved by 1975. She had relationships with other men, but the whole thing is that one relationship she had with another man, Michael Edwards, just showed how her daughter was basically winding up on the road to becoming a woman in crisis herself, because as she got involved with model Michael Edwards, he began participating in having feelings for the daughter, which can happen with a lot of single moms. You can get involved with a man, but that man will be looking at your daughter because she's younger and more attractive. And this is what led to her, again, looking to break up with Michael Edwards, who basically, as I see it, was a sexual deviant for looking to get involved with a teenage girl, similar to what happened with Elvis Presley. So it was sadly like Priscilla was reaping what she sowed later than what she sowed when she got involved with older Elvis, and basically her daughter was following in those footsteps. And eventually what happened with Priscilla Presley is she eventually wound up getting involved with a man who was a Brazilian screenwriter turned computer programmer, Marco Antonio Garcia, also known as Marco Garibaldi, and she lived with that man for 22 years. And as she lived with that man, they had a son, Navarone Garibaldi, and she was still doing work in acting and soap operas, and eventually continued to go on and continued to have relationships. And as she went on, sadly, she had great success, Priscilla Presley is a woman in crisis. Again, a woman in crisis who was put in crisis because of the dysfunctional situation her mother put her in, that put her on a paradigm of dysfunction. And this, as she was involved with Elvis Presley, it was all a part of the paradigm that she learned growing up in a home with a mother who had a secret about her father, and that secret about her father made it where she didn't have that trust with her father, that bond with her father to see him as a model of an ideal man. And because she never saw her father as a model of an ideal man, she didn't have a model to show her a good relationship with a man. And that's basically what screwed up Priscilla, that led to her getting involved with Elvis, who was basically a rock and roll pookie. And she got involved with this man because she wanted to get away from parents that she didn't trust. And I know I'm repeating that, but I want you to understand that what happens with children is that they build their relationships with other people based on the relationships they see their parents having. And the relationship she saw her parents have with secrets and lies led to her getting involved with a man who had a lot of lies as related to his own life, and led to her winding up in the similar kind of dysfunction that led to Priscilla Presley going from being the wife of an icon of the 20th century to winding up becoming a woman who was a woman in crisis, who passed that crisis on to her own daughter, Lisa Marie. Now, if you want to learn more about what leads to males winding up not being able to function in life, you can pick up my book, The Man Crisis, on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find The Man Crisis at other online booksellers like Draft to Digital, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and big box retailers like Walmart and Target. And if you want to learn why so many women have a hard time being able to find a course in life and have relationships that are healthy with men and women, you can pick up my book, The Woman Crisis, on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find The Woman Crisis at other online booksellers like Draft to Digital, Smashwords, the iBookstore, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, Walmart, and Target. And if you'd like to see me make more videos about Hollywood historical couples in crisis, you can send a donation of a minimum of $15 to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, John Haynes' Illuminati, the man who rules the world, takes on the head of the global elite in this all-new action-packed John Haynes series adventure. Get your copy of John Haynes' Illuminati in paperback and e-readers at Amazon.com and online booksellers everywhere. Coming to paperback and e-readers, Esteem Horror in the Hamptons. The aspiring angel tries to escape a house of horrors in this all-new Esteem series adventure. Pre-order your copy of Esteem Horror in the Hamptons in digital format at Amazon.com, Google Play, Draft to Digital, and other digital booksellers, or pick up your paperback copy on May 24th. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.